welcome everyone to our third session in the continuity of our own professional learning series. My name is Troy Hicks. I'm the director of the Chippewa River Writing Project, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by two of my colleagues, Dr. Sharon Murchie and Mr. Jeremy Heiler. Welcome to both of you and to everybody who's on. I'll have them more formally introduce themselves in just a few moments, but we are recording this on Tuesday, May 5th, 2020, and I have just a little bit of background information to get us started. So again, this is the third in a series of 8 workshops. When we were talking as Writing Project colleagues a few weeks ago about what in the world are we going to do in this time of remote learning, we did the Writing Project thing, and we started with teachers teaching teachers. And here we are, having promoted this webinar series and having colleagues join us from around the country and around the world to be part of this conversation. And so we're so glad that you're here today. You'll be able to find the archives and again, sign up for future sessions. If you are just joining us for the first time, I've got you on our email list, but you can also share that hyperlink, the ChippewaRiverWP.org/continuity of learning, and that will be the hub for all activity related to the series. And as mentioned just a moment ago, we are in the midst of our series right now. We are in session 3, which will be about facilitating effective online class sessions through video chat. We all know that we're getting more and more features in Zoom and Google Meet and WebEx and other things every day. Security features are getting better, as well as the opportunities for collaboration. And so that's our focus. You can see the other sessions that are coming up, and we can officially say that we are indeed going to be having an online summer institute, an open institute. Welcome to anyone in Michigan or beyond. We'll maybe have a little bit of time to talk about that at the end, and we'll have hopefully a promotional flyer and other materials related to the Institute coming out soon. So again, we're in week 3, and we're really looking forward to the conversation here today. Couple other quick kind of details. One, when people originally signed up for this series, you were asked to share some of your thoughts and questions and concerns. And we just reiterate that there are no right answers. There are many questions and we're all learning. And you can see some of the questions highlighted in this slide. And today, especially, we're going to be talking about how to really be most effective during synchronous online sessions. So I'm really looking forward to learning with Sharon and Jeremy, who I know have led dozens of webinars and other types of online activities with adult learners, as well as with their own students. So it's going to be pretty interesting today, and hopefully we're going to be able to address some of these types of questions. But they're worth kind of bringing back out every time we start another session, because they're all top of mind and things that we need to be concerned and conscious of, concerned about and conscious of. All right, and one more part of my public service announcement is the just quick technical things. Actually, what I realize now is that my little note here about the Zoom highlighting may go away, because I just updated my Zoom and now hyperlinks are back live again. Yeah, Jeremy's nodding at me. So technology is changing all the time. I'll have to adjust this slide for next week, but we do ask that you keep yourself muted, but there will probably be opportunities to talk. And if you need to save the chat, you can do that by clicking on those ellipses at the bottom of the screen toward the end of the session if you want to grab links and other resources. And last but not least, before I turn it over to Jeremy and Sharon, one of the things that anyone who's affiliated with the Writing Project knows is that we are a nonprofit organization. We are at this moment supported very minimally by our university, and that's just the way that the nature of the Writing Project has changed since 2011 in different budget situations. We're primarily supported through grants and professional development contracts. So every teacher that is presenting during this continuity of our own professional learning webinar series is doing it to learn him or herself. This is about our own learning as well. They're donating their time, talent, and expertise. If you appreciate the work that they're doing and you want to contribute to future work of the Writing Project, you individually, we can always accept a gift through the giving.cmich.edu website, where you can select the Chippewa River Writing Project as one of the categories for the donation. And if you are in a situation where you're able to contact a curriculum director, technology director, instructional coach, someone at your district who makes professional development decisions, please feel free to put them in touch with me, and I would be more than happy to talk about the services we can offer virtually, and eventually, again, we hope face-to-face. So with that, you're going to see less of me over the next probably 50 minutes or so and more of Sharon and Jeremy. I will be in the background kind of answering any technical questions and monitoring the chat. And I'm going to now turn it over to my two very capable and creative colleagues as they talk a little bit more about how to effectively navigate this world that we call synchronous video class time.
Cool. All right, I'll start us off. My name is Jeremy Heiler. I'm a middle school English and science teacher here in Michigan. I teach at a very small rural public school. My class sizes average about 25 kids, maybe a little less. And I'm currently teaching 6th grade English and 7th grade science. And if you need to get a hold of me after the webinar or at any time, I'm even willing to just sit down and have a Zoom conference call with you. You can contact me through my Twitter handle there at Jeremy V. Baller.
And I'm Sharon Murchie. I teach high school ELA in Bath, Michigan at Bath High School, which is pretty small, about Class C. So 1,000 kids in the district, 350 kids in the high school. I teach 11th grade English, 12th grade AP Lit, public speaking, creative writing, senior seminar, and a bunch of other electives. And same as Jeremy, you can always get a hold of me. I hate Twitter, but I will check it. And I'm in other places as well. So easy to get a hold of.
All right. And one of the other places that you can find us too, Sharon and I both have some published works that are out there, which I have co-authored with Troy on several. And Sharon has taken the plunge by herself with her teaching the research paper they want to write. So you can check those out at your earliest convenience. Yes, it's a shameless plug, but we're also proud of our work and we wanted to share that with you as well. So hopefully you can find some ideas in there. And with that being said, I am going to hand it over to Sharon. She's going to go through and talk about her experiences first.
All right. So the most important thing for our students right now is safety and security and human connection. In last week's session, if you happen to be here, Jill and I talked about the importance of putting Maslow's hierarchy of needs before Bloom's taxonomy, and to consider above all, not only our students' physical and emotional needs, but also to keep in mind our own physical and emotional needs, because this is also very new and uncomfortable and disheartening for us as well. So just a quick recap of Maslow. The need for human interaction is the third tier, after the psychological and safety needs. And with schools closed and social distancing in effect, it's really, really difficult to build a sense of connection and emotional intimacy if we can't see our students and if they can't see us, and if they can't see their friends. So video chat and Zoom meetings, when used thoughtfully and structured meaningfully, can help recreate the sense of connection and can combat that isolation that we're struggling with and that our students are struggling with. So I wanted Jeremy to play this short clip of a TED Talk. It's just about a minute long, but just really talks about building relationships and creating that sense of connection. Yes! Victory!
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships.
All right, so I just thought that that was a thoughtful way to think about what it is that we do. There is a Google form that hopefully Troy or Jeremy can put into the chat for you to get into, that just asks a couple of questions about how you are building relationships and making connections with your student. So I'm going to go silent for about 2 minutes while you quick fill that out. And then throughout this presentation, especially when Jeremy's talking, I will look at those responses and make sure that we address any questions you have or any concerns that you have to make sure that this webinar is really meaningful and useful to everyone. So if you could get into that Google form, just click that link and fill that out, please. That'd be fantastic. So I'll wait just another minute or two. Got a couple responses coming in. Some of you are finishing up.
And at risk of stating the obvious here, I just want to point out the teaching move that's happening right now. Like, you're bringing in the use of Google Forms as a way to get this pulse check, formative assessment, entry ticket, whatever we might want to call it, or whatever way we might want to use it. So I just really appreciate that you're using a tool that students are familiar with, that you're then going to take that feedback and then you're going to adjust your instruction during the video conference call. I think that's a really important move and certainly speaks to this connection to building relationships.
And to be completely transparent, I actually woke up in the middle of the night last night and went, oh my gosh, I don't have a human connection thing at the beginning. I actually was texting Jeremy at midnight last night, oh, I need to put something together and do this. So yeah, we almost didn't do this. A teacher fail, but I saved it.
It's when our best ideas come, usually in the middle of the night.
Exactly. About half of you are done, so 30 more seconds, and then I'll move on for the sake of time. All right, I will go through and look at your responses in detail after I get done with my section here. So in a little bit, Jeremy's going to talk about some meaningful ways to use video chat and to build those connections with students. But before we get to that, and before we can talk about what we need to do to create that sense of connection and how to go about it, we really need to talk about some of the pitfalls and issues that exist. So we're going to get into that a little bit. The very first thing to consider is Zoom fatigue. This is a very real phenomenon. I honestly have a sense of dread every time I have to start a Zoom session. And I'm in, I think, 3 or 4 Zoom meetings a day. And a lot of it, I think, comes from these elements of Zoom fatigue. So I'm going to run through it real quick for you. So according to an article published by the BBC and republished and expanded on by Forbes and then reposted in a couple of other places, there are 3 main elements that contribute to Zoom fatigue. It's basically an emotional and physical draining that video chats create in us. It's harder to process nonverbal cues, especially when there's often a slight delay. And everyone looks slightly different as they're peering into their computer cameras at odd and very unflattering angles. Conversations can get really exhausting and frustrating. When we're face to face with someone, we're physically present, and that allows us to be more in the moment and not feel so stilted. And in Zoom meetings and video chat, there tends to be like this, you're very performance oriented. And there's also a nonverbal overload that creates like a cognitive dissonance or a communication disconnect. It's literally more difficult and more emotionally and physically taxing to have a conversation through video chat than it is to have a conversation face to face. So that's one thing to consider. Also, in the classroom, we've trained ourselves to have this calculated silence that we're supposed to allow after we ask a question. The wait time can be, you know, a few seconds for a very easy regurgitation answer, up to, you know, a full minute for a really thought-provoking question, to allow students to process and think about it and respond. And that wait time, that silence, is torture in Zoom. It's really uncomfortable for us as the facilitator, and it's even more difficult for students to break through that silence and take the plunge, especially at the high school level, but I think it's across the board. You know, in the classroom, they often don't want to raise their hand and break the silence, but it's much, much harder on Zoom. And you end up tripping over each other. Even in my graduate level classes that were online, the silence was deafening and really uncomfortable. And finally, the third part is that, you know, we're staring into the camera, everyone's looking at us. We have a very heightened sense of how we look on camera, what they must be thinking, how many chins do I have, you know, we're very aware of that. My own kids, I have an 11-year-old and a 13, almost 14-year-old. And the days when they have scheduled Zoom meetings, it's miserable around here because they are so anxious about having to get online, about everybody looking at them, about what it's going to be like, what the background looks like. And so that definitely adds a sense of anxiety. And then the next thing to think about is accessibility, which just glancing through the Google form that you filled out, that this is definitely an issue. Technology can add another layer, both of technological issues, but also of access and equity issues. And we can't always mitigate these features. Some technical issues, you know, the internet cuts out or the call drops in the middle. I personally struggle all the time with CPU usage and bandwidth because we only have Chromebooks in our house. And there are 5 of us here working on various things at all times. And so technology is definitely a problem. And then of course, access and equity issues exist that can make inequalities and inequities even worse. You know, talking about student devices, student internet access, student responsibilities beyond school. You know, I know that one of my students right now, she hasn't been doing the work, but I also know that she's taking care of 5 brothers and sisters as her mom is a grocery store worker. And so, you know, to ask her to read 3 chapters of The Grapes of Wrath and respond to these thought-provoking discussion questions, that's a lot. So that's just, you know, situations like this really exacerbate those inequalities and inequities. And then, of course, we need protocols. We've heard, I'm sure you've heard horror stories about Zoom bombing and all of the different aspects that can happen, students posting inappropriate pictures or inappropriate backgrounds. I know that in the first staff meeting that we held in our district, it took 15 minutes for the high school teachers to figure out how to mute or unmute their mics. I mean, it was 15 minutes while we sat there with, oh, you're muted, oh, you're unmuted, you know, so it was very frustrating. So we need to put protocols in place, not only to protect our students, but also to protect our sanity. So there are some features that we can set up pretty easily when we set up our meetings to help prevent some of those horror stories from occurring that you've heard in the news. So I'm going to run really quickly through how to set up, and I'm using specifically Zoom here in my examples, but I took a couple screenshots on how to set up your meetings so that you can avoid some of those horror stories that we keep seeing. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is when you log into Zoom, you can see up at the top right, it just says host a meeting. But if you do that, you don't have all of the safeguards in place. So in the center of the screen where it says schedule a new meeting, if you click that tab, then you can actually set up some of the safety protocols. So when you click that tab, you set up the time and date of the meeting, but then these meeting options down at the bottom are really helpful. You can determine whether or not your video is on and off, whether their video is on and off, and the settings right at the bottom make mute participants upon entry. That's awesome. That gives you the control over sound. That way the students can't run rampant. Enable the waiting room, absolutely. Troy did that obviously for this meeting here. I do that for my students because that way you can see who's waiting in the room before you let them in. So those two things, those boxes to tick right there are super important. Then once you get into the meeting, over on the bottom right, you can adjust some of the aspects here too. So again, you can mute them on entry. You can allow them to unmute themselves, or that you can keep them muted until you manually unmute them. I always untick the box of allowing them to rename themselves. I don't need creative names showing up in Zoom. And you can enable the waiting room. And then that bottom one, lock meeting. So once you have all your kids in your Zoom room, you can lock the meeting so that no one else can come in and request access. And that's super helpful. That way, if you kick a kid out or if a stranger's trying to get in, they can't get back in. The meeting's locked. So again, those are just some simple things that you can just tick those boxes once you get into Zoom. On the very next screen, so here I have one of my students in a Zoom with me, and you'll notice when I look at the participants, I can mute her. So if she's making a ruckus or saying inappropriate things, I can just click the mute button and completely mute her. And then if she's still being a pain in the butt, if you go to the next screen, if she's still being a pain, I can click the part that said, I think it was like said more. Yeah, so I could mute her and then more. And if I pull the drop down menu for more, I can remove her completely. So I can remove her from my Zoom meeting and she can no longer be disruptive. And if I have the meeting locked, then she can't come back in. So these are just some protocols that take 30 seconds to set up, but can avoid some of those stories that I keep reading in the news and keep seeing on. I'm not sure, I see in the question, do you happen to know if the lock works on recurring meetings? Yes, it does, because I have this meeting that you see here that I took these screenshots and that's set up as a recurring meeting. So yes, you can lock individually. And yeah, I only have Chromebooks, so all of these controls that I'm showing you are what it looks like on a Chromebook. So just to answer those couple of questions in the chat. So that's kind of it from my end. Those are some protocols that are really important to set up. And then Jeremy's going to talk to you about some reasons and ways to thoughtfully use video chat.
All right, so how's everybody doing? Speaking of Zoom fatigue, we're going to take 30 seconds. Just do a quick stretch your hands towards the ceiling if you can. So get your body moving a little bit. We all sit down really long, so you need to put your hands up in the air. You need to stretch towards that ceiling. Let's see those hands go up. Okay, get your body stretched a little bit, get the heart rate going. Hey, I promise not to be too boring. Don't want to put you to sleep. So, get how you see some shoulders moving. That's good. Got some other hands going up. Good. Okay, so if you feel like raising the roof, you can do that too. Troy's doing the arm worm. So that's good. So keep those bodies moving. So, I'm going to talk to you, really most of my stuff that I'm going to talk to you about today comes from two places, and that is using your head and using your heart. Just a little bit of a disclaimer. Some of the stuff that I'm presenting to you today comes from a couple different podcasts that I'll share at the end that I find very useful. They're really good. Podcasts are awesome to listen to on your walks if you need something to listen to. So, but using our heads and our hearts. So what does it mean to use our head? What that means is that we keep it simple. We give options to the students. And what I mean by giving options would be if you're doing a live meeting, for those students that don't have the opportunity to make it to your meetings, because we really can't make it mandatory, at least here in our state, we can't make it mandatory for students to be on those meetings. You can record it for students to view at other places. So you can give that link out to them, or you can pre-record your instructions. Pre-recording, you could use things like Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic. Screencastify is a add-on that you can put right into your Chrome browser. The editing features aren't all that great on Screencastify, but Screencast-O-Matic is pretty inexpensive to use, and they have some pretty great editing tools on there. Be transparent with your students. I think even our situation when we were trying to do the sound, tell your students if you're struggling. Let them know that you're struggling too with all of this. I think it's very important. Be transparent with your students and tell them that, look, this time isn't going to work for me, or I need to do this. Here's what my instructions are from my principal or from our principal that we need to do. So being transparent, I think, helps them feel a little bit more at ease. They get to see you being a human as well, and kind of going back to building that relationship. Listen to student feedback. I think one of the most valuable things right now that I do in my office hours, that I do with my teaching partner, is actually listening to students' feedback. And I'll ask them, is it what we're doing, is it too much? Is it not enough? How are you feeling about using this new digital tool? Is it cool? Do you like it? Okay, those types of things. So just being transparent with students. Using your heart. Listen to them. Okay. Allow grace. I have everything due on a Friday, but I always tell the students, I'm like, if you can get into me by Sunday, great. If students still don't have time to get that turned into me because of other responsibilities, I think Sharon had said it earlier about students that actually have to take care of their younger siblings. Make sure that you're understanding of that and let them get those things turned in. Be patient with them. I think this has been, I'm a patient person overall, but I think this has actually tried my patience, this whole situation. And so be ever more patient with them than what you have in the past. Reach out to them. Whether you have a student that's turning everything in, maybe they don't make it to the meetings that you have, but they're still turning everything in, still reach out to them, ask them how they're doing. Maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing with the rest of the students that are in the time that you're teaching. So ask them how they're doing. Maybe even set up a one-on-one Zoom if you can, or if another teacher can be in there with you, that would be great. Okay. And then the last one, I think, is, I kind of touched on this a little bit, understand that home. Just understand what's going on at home. Every situation is different. I know for a few of my students that school was their safe place, and that has been taken away from them. And it really is a bummer, because I really do worry about those students in terms of their mental well-being. So just a couple of things in helping you. Create your own physical space when you are trying to do meetings. I had a laugh at our dean of students yesterday morning, where he said he actually physically drew tape on the lines around his chair in his dining room so that his kids knew not to walk in that area when he was doing his office hours. And I thought that was pretty cool. And if you have a green screen, maybe set that up. If you're, subconscious about, you have a little bit of conscious about, worried about paranoid about your background, what's going on back there. If you have a spare bedroom, maybe that's even better. Blank walls, dining room table. I've read some things about teachers trying to do it in their bedroom, and that's not necessarily the best place for teachers to be doing their Zoom meetings, is in their bedroom. I know I wouldn't want my students to see my bedroom, or probably as less of my house as possible. So set up that space for yourself. Be conscious of the way that we learn. Everybody learns differently. I don't think I need to go into a lot of this, but use visual cues when you're online teaching with your students, whether it's videos, pictures, podcasts. If you can send out any kind of podcast, have students do, if there's anything that you can have them do, in terms of getting out and going outside. One of my colleagues, I know, Mr. Jeremy Windsor, I think is in here still. I know he's asked students to go out and observe birds. So actually get them outside, take pictures, observe birds, get that kinesthetic learning going a little bit for those students. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get them to learn, and everybody learns differently. So try to do the best that you can with all those expectations. Model for students, show, don't tell, give students examples, write with them. I do a shared Google document with my students for English, and it is what I would call the 6th grade interactive journal, where everybody in the class is writing on it at the same time. And we talk about protocol for those spaces that we write in. So they get to see how I'm writing as well. It's something that I do in my normal face-to-face classroom anyway. So I try to make sure that they can see that I'm writing with them just as much as I want them to write. Use things like, there's some whiteboard apps out there. I'm trying to think of the one that's out there. I just had it in my brain and I lost it, but there's lots of different whiteboarding apps that you can use on your screen for students to help them. Invite parents and guardians to your meetings. We had a parent come in to our office hours the other day. It was great. It was a really neat interaction to be able to be with that parent. So invite them, again, going back to being transparent is what I was talking about earlier. Other types of information to show whether your students are engaged. One of the things that I am going to have you do, and Troy, I don't know if you can see the link, and maybe if you can't see the link, I can put it into the chat, but we already know about Poll Everywhere. I think everybody knows about Poll Everywhere. Answer Garden is another one. It's a quick survey. And I think, Troy, did you find it?
Yep, just dropped it in there. Yep.
So if you could go to that Answer Garden, and I'm just asking you to describe the COVID-19 situation, one positive word. Okay, we've all talked about the negative, so let's talk about a positive that's going to come out of this, or a positive that you have experienced, in using one word. So I'm gonna stop my slideshow here for a second, Garden, so we can take a look at people typing in their answers. You can see the words popping up now. And with Answer Garden, the more words that, the more of the same word that's used, the bigger that it will get. So you can see like more frequent answers. And this could be used as a quick formative assessment for students in terms of getting them to answer a question. This would be something to be able to kind of get a feel for the group as you are coming, or as they're coming into your classroom. If you're getting them started, kind of getting them settled in to a Zoom meeting. I love the pajama pants ideas, absolutely. So lots of different things in terms of positivity. So I always like to try to look at the bright side of things, and I think this is one thing that you can do with your students. Maybe this is even a question you could ask your students. But Answer Garden's really easy. It's free, doesn't cost anything. Real simple to use. I think they ask for some donations if you'd like to donate to them, but you can leave your link open for a day, or your survey open for a day, or you can leave it open for a week. You can leave it open, I think, up to a month. So just a really good quick assessment tool that you could give your students. Another one could be something like Pear Deck is another one. Whoops, I'm gonna go back here. Pear Deck is interactive with Google Drive or your Google Slides. You can actually embed, and that's peardeck.com. You can actually embed assessments right into the slides, so it's more interactive. You could share out the slide presentation with your students. You can go through it with them while you're actually online with them in a Zoom meeting or a lesson with your students. And right now they're offering their premium service for 3 months for free. So you get 90 days to get all their premium stuff. And otherwise they do have a free edition, but you just don't get access to some of the cool stuff that they have. So that's worth looking at. And I would spend some time on Pear Deck, but I could also do a complete whole presentation on Pear Deck too. So I won't go into it too much. Step away in terms of assessments. This was a question I saw on the questions that you had given to Troy. Step away from those traditional methods. Yes, that even means Google Forms because that is becoming a little bit of a tradition. But I'm not saying that in terms of being mean. If that's something you're comfortable with and it's simple for you, you can definitely still use it. But using things like Flipgrid, we've learned about Flipgrid in some of our last presentations. I'm going to walk through and show you EdPuzzle real quick. And you can access EdPuzzle and have your students. That's a great way for them to also do some for you to do some assessment with them. Allow students to show you what they've learned in different ways. Like I said, have them go out and take pictures. Have them go out and record a video outside. Stop motion videos. There's Stop Motion Studio. There's Flip a Clip. Those are things that you can use. I have a student that loves to make flip books, and I have challenged him to go online and do it digitally and see if that's something that he could do. And I would love to be able to see him be able to put that together. If you have not seen EdPuzzle, EdPuzzle is a really awesome tool. What you can do is you can grab a video, one that they have for you, or one that you have, the one that you grab from YouTube, and you can then ask questions of students. And so I'll show you my class setup, and this links with Google Classroom, which is really easy. If you already have Google Classroom set up, all you gotta do is link your accounts together, and they will import your classes into EdPuzzle, which is really nice. And so I gave them last week, I think 2 weeks ago, a video on the continental drift. We were studying the supercontinent. And so you can see when you play the video, you can go ahead and plop in questions, and you can see on the right hand side here, there's different times where I have asked questions. And so there's like some open-ended questions. For example, when the students get to this part, see if I can get to that question. What'll happen is that question will pop up, and students cannot move forward until they answer that question. My recommendation, and this also comes from the recommendation of one of the podcasts that I follow, is to have students do open-ended questions, because kind of gets them to think a little bit more, because with multiple choice questions, what can happen is students can then just go out on the internet and kind of just get the answers for themselves, and they can kind of breeze through without actually watching the video. You can grade all of your students separately. You can see that I have 119 new answers. And actually I've gone through and looked at these already, but you can see some students that didn't do it. It'll show you in terms of progress. It shows you students that even did only 90%, okay? Students that did 100%. Yes, you can prevent skipping from students. You can turn on closed captioning, so you can help those students that may not hear as well, or are hearing impaired. So that's a really nice addition for EdPuzzle as well. It's proven to be really good. One of my colleagues, Holly Malik, she reached out to EdPuzzle, and they have given our school a free license for all the premium things on EdPuzzle. So if you reach out to them and talk to them about kind of the situation, they will, I know, be more than happy to probably extend that same invitation to you as well, which is really, really nice. So again, looking at different ways we can assess our students instead of just the traditional ways that we have things. So some podcasts I was telling you about in terms of things to consider, the House of Ed Tech. And both of these were ones that Troy turned me on to a while ago. Chris Nessie, he's a great individual, super nice guy. You can reach out to him at any time and he will answer questions for you. Lots of episodes for the House of Ed Tech. And he's talked about the whole COVID-19 through a couple different episodes on his podcast. And I believe he posts a new episode about once every 2 weeks. And then the Cult of Pedagogy podcast with Jennifer Gonzalez. She's been around for a little bit of time. She's got a lot of great resources on her page. Just great people to be connected to, great place for resources. So I would highly recommend listening to those podcasts, or even just going and checking out some of the links that they have on their sites. They can take you to some really great stuff. So in terms of final thoughts, Sharon and I know that we would like you to keep it simple. Try make it simple for yourself, make it simple for your students. And there isn't an instructional manual on this. What Sharon and I are saying to you doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. It's what's working for us. It's what's working for our students, and what works for us and for our students may not work for you or your students. Don't demand perfection. By no means do I demand that out of my students. I don't demand it out of them when we're face to face. We're not perfect human beings. We just try to get through and do the best that we can. And then finally, I think the biggest piece to all this is to be very understanding of everyone's situation, even including our own. I know that I have 3 kids about the same age as Sharon's. I have a 13, 11, and an 8-year-old. And man, I tell you what, when I'm here doing my work and they're at the table with me, it's chaos. And so trying to teach my own students and trying to teach my own children, it's a whirlwind. And I think we're probably all experiencing that to some degree. So be understanding of everybody's situation. And so again, we're just coming back and kind of putting a bow on this a little bit. We have some ideas in our books. You can check those things out if you get a chance to. Another shameless plug at the end of our presentation for our publications. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. And so, yeah, that's where we're at with things. And hopefully you got something out of it. And if you have any questions now, might be a good time. And I don't know if Troy has anything else to say, but maybe we can ask some questions, or we can talk about our Summer Institute at this point.
Yeah, let's open it up to a couple of questions. I'm going to rewind the chat just slightly. Our friend, Mr. Windsor, said, is this able to be linked directly into the Google document? That was about 4 or 5 minutes ago when you were still talking about the forms. I don't quite know. Maybe Windsor, if you want to take the mic and clarify your question, that could be helpful for Hyler here real quick.
It was not about Google Forms, about the EdTech. Was that what it was?
EdPuzzle.
EdPuzzle?
Yeah. So is that able to be linked right directly into Google Classroom? I know they've got some programs that the apps can be embedded right into Google Classroom, and then any of those activities get automatically graded in this grade book.
From what I know, I don't think there's a direct sync. All I know is that you can import. It'll kind of connect with your class list, and then when you create an assignment in EdPuzzle, it will ship it out to all of the students on Google Classroom. So if you say share this or assign this to my student, I think it's assign this to my students, it'll assign it. But in terms of the gradebook, that I'm not aware of. Because at that point, I was not using the Google Classroom gradebook at that point. So now that I am, I could answer that better in another week.
Just a quick technical question. Wendy was saying, how do we save the chat from my phone? I think there's a way to do it, but I'm sure clicking multiple things on a small screen is difficult right now. So I will download the chat today because we were especially chatty with lots of resources, and I'll make sure that I include that when I send out the follow-up email. Troy,
do you know, in terms of you shared the back channel, is it YoTeach? Is that the new back channel that's kind of replaced a little bit of what was today's meet?
Yep, YoTeach is one. Coincidentally, I just dropped in a link from Tech and Learning that's got YoTeach and like 9 or 10 other different tools, Answer Garden being one of them. So yeah, check out that link from Tech and Learning. Some are free, some are freemium, but they do offer some options. And even in Google Presentations. I don't know, Jeremy, you could activate it really quickly from your control bar. There's a Q&A feature in Google Presentations that you can activate. It's kind of, yep, see it right there in the middle of the toolbar.
Just a second, I'm going to move I need to move my participants out of the way. So,
Yeah,
okay,
no
there we
problem.
go.
Yeah, and so you can launch that Q&A feature. Now, what probably happened on Jeremy's screen is he got another little pop-up window that we can't see right now.
Yeah.
And then it gives him the instructions about how to launch it and turn it into an interactive Q&A. So that's, yep, so there you go. So then you can give that URL to, you know, someone, and then, or your whole audience, obviously, and then they log in and they can answer and ask questions there too. Oh, that's great. Pictionary. Lori played Pictionary with students with the whiteboard type thing. Cool. Or, oh, on paper, and then you like hold it up. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That's the other thing, thinking about like having students use their devices, turn the camera on, and basically turn it into a document camera, basically. Definitely fun to use new tools or use familiar tools in new ways. I'll do the public service announcement part really quick here. Obviously, we are at the end of session 3. Session 4 next week, we're going to have promising experiences for student writers. So as we head into the final weeks of the school year and try to get our students engaged and remain connected in authentic ways, we'll be talking about that. So you'll get all the links and information at the same time next week. Our series, as always, that hyperlink that I shared at the beginning, and I'll drop in here again. When you scroll down and you go under the session titles, you'll see a link to an actual blog post, and then in that blog post I've embedded the recording, links to the slides, and other resources that have been shared. Again, all the teachers that are doing this work right now are donating their time and energy. The Writing Project is a nonprofit organization. We get a minimal amount of support from the university at this point, just due to the nature of the funding model and where it comes from. But if you are so inclined and would like to support us either through a donation or by contacting us about professional development work, I would be more than happy to talk with you. So please let me know. And yeah, this summer, I don't know, Mr. Heiler, we've been brainstorming a little bit of this recently. Well, Sharon has, Mr. Windsor, a lot of us that are on the call. Becky, anybody want to say anything about what we're not quite ready to put the announcement out there, but the paperwork is in motion. Our colleague Janet Nair is working on a flyer for it. So we are definitely going to be doing something, but if any of you want to say something about the something, feel free. That'd be great.
I don't know how to say something about the something.
Yes, say something about this thingy that we've got planned later this summer.
We will do our best not to do Zoom fatigue. That has been kind of our topic. We've been kind of going around in terms of the model, what this would look like virtually. But it's 2 weeks, correct, Troy? It'd be 2 weeks long, virtually, looking at about you know, in the mornings, probably about 3 hours, obviously with some breaks in there. You wouldn't be sitting for 3 straight hours, and then doing some smaller group breakouts, I think a little bit later on in the day with some writing stuff, in terms of trying to bring in some of the, what a traditional summer institute might look like, but trying to bring some of those things in there. It won't look like a traditional summer institute, obviously, but some of those things into our web conference that we're going to be having, our institute that we're going to be having. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, so I hope to see some people sign up and be there. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Well, I think what we're able to do here in the webinars give like these really top level overviews of, oh, hey, here's this thing we tried, here's this thing we tried. But during the Summer Institute, we're going to dive deep and, you know, experience teaching demonstrations, and then be able to step back from those teaching demonstrations and reflect on them and think about what we can use to carry forward. And we're not exactly sure what's going to be happening next year anywhere, but our strong suspicion is that there's probably going to be some socially distanced alternative schedule, block schedule, alternating days, remote learning, virtual learning, something. So let's talk and learn, and, you know, engage in the process of teachers teaching teachers this summer. So Other thoughts or questions or closing thoughts too from our presenters today, Sharon and Jeremy? If you have any thoughts that you'd like to wrap up with too, we'll give you a moment to share. Anything else from the chat room? Anyone want to take the mic and share any closing ideas or maybe one takeaway that you might try out with your own students here in the next week?
So I have a quick question. Is there anyone else out there using Big Blue Button?
I've been a participant in a Big Blue Button web conference, but I have not personally ever tried it as a host. So,
Hi, we use our Schoology all the time because we have to do all of ours under Schoology conferences, and we use the Big Blue Button for that.
So I was trying to figure out how to do the polling in Big Blue Button, but I really couldn't figure it out. Instead of trying to give them a link to like Poll Everywhere or the new one that I hadn't used before that Jeremy shared, right in Big Blue Button, there's a polling feature, but I couldn't really figure it out. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am not, but maybe some of the other teachers at Lakeshore are.
Very cool. Yeah, it's an open source alternative to Zoom and others. And yeah, I have not explored it enough to know if it has all those features. So glad to know that people are checking that out.
Yeah. So actually where I teach it's embedded in our Moodle. And I love it because it's embedded in the Moodle and it automatically saves. The format is set up a little differently than Zoom and I can see things better. I prefer it. But sometimes there's glitches and it's harder to do things like polling than Zoom is because the chat's different and just different things. I was just wondering if someone knew how to do the polling right in Big Blue Button.
Not quite sure, but thanks for asking, Wendy. I don't know. We'll have to do a little searching around to figure out.
Maybe I'll play with it with my students. We only have a couple of times left. So I have a few students who are diehards who come every time and they don't need anything from me. They're perfectly fine. And maybe I'll ask them to play around with me.
Great. Yes. Wonderful. All right. And certainly, yes, thank you for mentioning that in the chat there, Gail.
Yes.
We are very, very much aware that hopefully there's some flexibility with the PD funds. And like I said, we should have a full flyer and a website landing page and registration form and all that stuff. My goal is to have that up and ready for our webinar for next week. And certainly we'll have that available, if not by next week, certainly by the middle of May, and we'll get that out to everyone. We'd really like to learn with you this summer. So, all right, well, we are just past the top of the hour. So any closing words from our two presenters today? Last parting words of wisdom about hosting synchronous conferences with your students?
You know, the only thing that I would add is for your own sanity, less is more. And so my goal is always, what can I do? Keep it simple and teach the students who are there, and then reach out one-on-one to the students who aren't there when you have a chance. But, we've got to use some compassion on ourselves too.
Yeah, I'll echo what Sharon said. Just keep it simple and less is more. I mean, it's, I thank goodness I'm not trying to push out a ton of stuff to kids because I think it would be a nightmare for my students. And I think they're encountering enough. So yeah, and last thing, I hope you guys got something out of it. That's all I ever want out of anything that I ever do with other teachers. So hopefully you're able to walk away with something.
Yes, definitely some great stuff here today and thoughts here in the chat room. So I will save that chat file. I'll send that out when I send the follow-up email. Thank you everyone for being here today. As always, we'll hang out for a few minutes after the recording ends if you have additional questions and didn't want to be captured for posterity. Thanks again to Sharon. Thanks again to Jeremy. We really appreciate your time, talent, and energy and what you're doing with and for kids in your classrooms and beyond. So thank you.